My name is James. I'm a drug addict.
Hey, James.
And my sobriety date is December 23rd of 2017. I have a home group. It's the Fourth Dementia group of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I want to thank Tommy for asking me to come do this. It's funny, I actually listened to like a couple of tapes of some of the guys that did this here. And they're all people that I know, and I don't know, it seems so easy for them that like they just seem, everything comes off smoothly, and in my head I'm like, I just can't sound like that. I don't know. But and then before we dive into it, I was in rehab when I was 18, and it was a big rehab. There was like 40 of us in there, men and women, and different groups would bring in meetings, and if AA brought a group in, everybody would go around and introduce themselves and say, oh, I'm James, I'm an alcoholic. And there was this one guy that he was like 45, he had just got out of prison, like he was a real big guy, and he was just a real, I just looked up to this guy, and he would in the AA meetings, he'd go, I'm Jimmy, I'm a drug addict. And like in my head, I was like, that right there is how I want people to perceive me. And so now I have the freedom here for that to be. When in this deal, this deal saved my life, right? And like we were joking around before the meeting about like, oh, I look like I could, sell Suboxone to the doctor's office, right? And it's like, it's hot outside. I don't exactly feel comfortable dressing up in a suit right now, but there was a time when like a Holy t-shirt and gym shorts with like cigarette burns were like the only pieces of clothing that I owned. And, today, because of this deal, like I get to own a suit now. Granted, it's from Kohl's. I wore it to a wedding, but, it still counts for something. I'm from here originally, from Newport Richey. My childhood growing up, like the longer I stay around this deal and like listen to other people's childhoods growing up, like I begin to have a new appreciation for mine, right? Because I grew up in a middle-class family. My mom was a teacher. My dad was a journalist. My dad was, he's a self-admitted alcoholic, and, when I was younger, I was sure to tell you that he was an alcoholic. Growing up, there was, like, a lot of turmoil. My parents got divorced when I was in elementary school, and I don't know if, like, stuff like this, is, like, precursors to me, being a drug addict, or if I was just I think I was a pretty good kid most of the time, but, like, my cousins would come into town and, like, I'd go in my mom's drawer and, like, steal a big wad of cash so that, like, we could ride up to Publix and buy, like, IBC root beer, right? Like, I don't know. It was just because I wanted them to think that I was cool, but I feel remorseful about stealing this money from Mom. I was probably, like, 9 years old, and so, like, she would drive to the grocery store, and I'd go in to get bread, and she'd go to give me money, and I'd say, no, I got it, and I'd go in there and buy the bread. Well, there's no reason for a 9-year-old to have cash, to her knowledge, I had none. So, I quickly get found out for stuff like this. But, at that age and, like, throughout elementary school and stuff, I don't remember feeling different from anybody else. I hear that described a lot, and from, like, maybe 12 years old to, like, I'm 30 now, so 12 to 30, like, my memory's a little spotty sometimes. There's, like, long periods of my life that are just kind of a blur. And, I think Pat came up to me the other day, it was, a guy, and was telling a story about seeing me in a Walmart, and I don't remember this at all. And, there was another guy that Chris was sponsoring who came up to me, and we went to high school together. I guess we had classes together. We were friends, and, like, I couldn't place him. It just, things went downhill for me very quickly. And, when I was in middle school, that's when I started, probably puberty is when I started to realize that, like, I was pretty inadequate compared to everybody else in the room. That I just had these glaring things about me that, like, I didn't like. And, we were sitting around in a circle of maybe 10 people at PE one day, and this one girl, one of the hot girls in school, was talking about how guys with abs were attractive. And, like, I play computer games. Like, I'm not exactly I'm not going to be on the cover of any Sports Illustrated, right? And I just remember thinking to myself that, like, this is why nobody likes you, because you're fat. And so, like, that night from, like, 7th grade to, like, 8th grade, I would run around my mom's apartment building every single night and, like, lost, like, 80 pounds. I don't know. It's just, I get these ideas in my head, and, like, sometimes I'm all or nothing with these ideas, and sometimes I start a lot of things and don't finish them. Yeah, I don't know. I played a lot of sports growing up, and around like that 8th grade mark is kind of when I quit playing sports. You know, my dad would show up to like track meets, and you know, he'd be drunk and he'd be like running next to me, and like his pants would fall down and stuff, and it kind of just sailed the boat for me that I was done with playing sports that, like, you know, your parents could come to. I had two older sisters, or I have two older sisters, and they're 6 and 7 years older than me. So right about this, like, 8th grade to 9th grade time, they're graduating high school, and it's a pretty good time for them. And it turned out it was a pretty good time for me, too. My mom was, she was strict sometimes, but, like, with other things, she wasn't. So, like, she'd go out of town for the weekend, and it would just be us at the house, so my sisters would throw parties. And, you know, these are all, like, college-age kids coming over, and, like, you know, I was 8th to 9th grade, and so it was kind of funny to, like, let's get the kid drunk. And so I would drink and do all this stuff, and I don't remember, like, growing taller or thinking that, like, I was better or anything like that. I do remember, like, thinking to myself that, like, these, you know, freshman college girls would be lucky to give me a kiss tonight. And I don't think it ever happened. It turns out it would be very illegal for that to happen at that time, too. I was, like, 13 years old. But when I got into, like, the end of 8th grade, you know, I can't place it now, like, where the thought came into my head, but, you know, there was, like, a little bit of drugs starting to, like, dabble around. And it was like weed and stuff. It wasn't like what we get into a little later, but I remember thinking to myself that, like, oh, I could buy this for $10 and sell it to somebody else for $20. And so I had this genius idea. I probably watched a movie or something, and I tell this guy I want, you know, $10, and if he could just turn it into $20, that would be cool. And later that day, he came to me with a bag and said, "Here you go." And the whole concept kind of got lost on me. I thought if I gave him $10, he'd give me $20 back. And that was the first time that I got high. And again, like, I don't think that, like, it didn't, like, unlock some magic box for me or anything like that, but what I do remember it doing for me is just being able to breathe a little bit easier. At that point, I didn't realize that I was so wound up and that I was so, like, tight inside. But I don't know. Again, maybe it's just because not enough of an effect was produced, but I don't remember, like, this big change coming over me. But 9th grade, going into high school, kind of changed a lot for me. I immediately kind of got drawn into this group of seniors, and so, like, when they would skip school, I would skip school. You know, when they were smoking pot, I was smoking pot. I don't know, just all this stuff, and this is where things get a little fuzzy for me, because, like, 9th to 10th grade, I got arrested a lot. I was smoking a lot of weed, and I thought that I was hiding it pretty good. Turns out, like, my mom kind of had a little bit of an idea what was going on, and so she told me as long as I didn't miss school, as long as I got good grades, and as long as I was home by curfew, that I could smoke as much pot as I wanted to. And in my head, I was like, this is the golden ticket right here. Like, I could live my life like this. And so the very next night, I come home at, like, 9:59. You know, my curfew's 10, and my eyes are bloodshot. I didn't put Visine in for the first time. And my older sisters just could not stop poking fun at the fact that I was high. And my mom hated it, and so she told me the next day that I wasn't allowed to do that anymore. And I don't know, there was just, like, a defiant streak in me that I was like, you just told me yesterday that I could do this. And, you know, I start telling some friends about this, and I'm like, oh, well, just try this instead. The effect is very similar, you know, to smoking pot, except you don't get red eyes. And it turned out that was Xanax. And like 2 weeks later, I get arrested for, like, car hopping in the middle of the day in a neighborhood. And again, like, I don't remember a lot of this stuff, right? Like, I do remember this in particular, that we got chased in a neighborhood, and we get back to our neighborhood, like, through it was like Trinity West and Nature's Hideaway were connected to a couple of neighborhoods around here. And then we remember that we left our backpacks in the front of Trinity West. So we're like, well, let's just walk back a different street to go over there. Well, turns out the cops were riding down every street looking for us, get arrested. And that one was kind of like a slap on the wrist, right? And it was, again, like a bit of a precursor for me that, like, I felt like, the movies, like, you get arrested as a kid and, like, they take you home and tell your parents, like, don't let us catch them doing this again. Like, that's kind of how I thought it was going to be I didn't realize there was, like, a long, like, juvenile detention and, like, there's a whole judicial system just for kids. And my perception of that was totally skewed. But I finished that, like, diversion in 9th grade and things kind of got calmed down for a little bit. But then, I don't know, again, like, this is where things get a little spotty. But I was skipping school, and my mom didn't know what to do. And, like, my mom's a good person. She, just like anybody else, she has all her own faults. But, like, deep down, like, my mom is a good person. And, like, she did the best she could for a long time with 4 kids as a single mom. And she called the cops on me because she was worried about me, about what was going on. And so the cops come to my house. I'm supposed to be at school, and it's like 9 o'clock in the morning, and like they come with ski masks on and stuff, and I'm like 14 years old. I don't really know what's going on, but like I've got a backpack that's got like scales in it. It's got weed in it. It's got Xanax in it, and like I get hit with like a distribution charge, right? And I don't even know why I had the scale. I wasn't selling weed yet. Probably to check, like when you sold to me, I had to make sure you were giving me what you told me you were going to give me. In case you didn't know this, I like to plan things, right? And I don't know, that time they decided that I needed to go to a rehab. And 14 years old, going to rehab, it's just, I don't know, I got there, and it was like men and women, there were girl and boys there, right? This is all underage stuff. But you're, like, kept separate, and, like, you sit in the same room, but you're not allowed to talk to each other, right? And but this girl that I knew was there, and she'd been there, like, 2 months. This was a 6-month program, and she, like, mouths to me that she's leaving. And I'm like, if you're leaving, you've been here 2 months. I've been here 2 days. What are the odds of me making it? So I leave with her, and we leave. And then, I don't know, I get arrested for something else. Again, this is where things, like, I don't really remember that much. I had like 13 or 14 felony charges before I turned 18, and so they all kind of, like, meshed together. And so I got arrested. I do 21 days in JDC, and they let me out, and, like, my mom won't let me come home anymore. And understandably so, like, I was just a terror in that house at 15 years old. So I get sent up to Gainesville to live with my dad, who's living there at the time, and I was there like 3 or 4 days, and I got a burglary charge. Because in my head, I was like, I'm going to go to the apartment downstairs, take what I need, take his car that night, and drive back to Newport Richie. And so that was, I don't know, I landed back in JDC, and this time they decided to send me to like a juvenile detention facility, right? So this was a 6-month to 6-year place, and they could tack time on you if you got into fights and if you got into any trouble or anything like that. So I don't know, I hate to call this like God's grace, but like I got put on the laundry duty, which is 2 people out of like 400 people, because I got my GED while I was in there. And so I was kept separate from everybody else. Like all day long, every day I was kept separate, and I managed to get out of there in 6 months. And that was when I got out of there, and like I really had my head held high that like this is where I was going to turn my life around. That like I was just a kid, right? I was 16 years old. If I could just kind of do an about turn, maybe get a job. I was 16. I had my GED, so I was like, I'll just go to college now, and then I'll be ahead of everybody else that thought I was going to be a failure. And I don't know, people used to tell me all the time when I was around that age that I had so much potential. And, for like 5 years they called it potential. And then from like 15 to like 18, they started calling it wasted potential, right? Because I was just, every time I would get out of these places with like the best of intentions that I could turn my life around this time, I seemed to take it 1 degree further into the red, right? And this is when I was introduced to shooting up opiates, right? And so at 16, I started down this path that like, it was a crash course, right? Like, I didn't last very long ever when I got out of jail or anything, or rehab or all these things. And so by the time I was 17, I had gotten a burglary of an occupied dwelling charge, and at 17 they decided that was enough for the judicial system, the juvenile judicial system for me, and so they charged me as an adult. And for the first time in my life, like JDC was 21 days, like, you know, whatever, this program I had been to that seemed really scary when I got there. Well, I just did laundry for 6 months, like, it was fine. This time I was actually going to, like, jail with, like, people, you know, like adults. And, you know, I've seen movies. You know, this is where guys like me, you know, get taken advantage of. So what I call Mom. I'm like, Mom, we got to do something here, right? And my mom was a GED teacher, and so she used to be a GED teacher in the jail. And it seemed like a really good in that, like, I had an employee that worked for the jail that was, you know, related to me. So I got, at 17, they keep you in the medical wing when you're a juvenile, and then when you turn 18, they usually put you just out in the population. But my mom and me got me put into protective custody because I thought, like, I don't know what I thought at that time. Until I got around, like, actual people that had been to jail, I didn't really understand what protective custody was. You know, I just thought that this is a place where, like, I got my own cell, and, like, people, you know, I didn't really talk to anybody, like, it was kind of nice. And, my dad would send me books to read and stuff, so I sat there for 11 and a half months, waiting on, like, either a trial or whatever you want to call it. But, like, this judge at the time, Judge Webb was his name. He was kind of notorious for, like, throwing the book at people, right? Like, he actually got removed from felony court because of this. But, like, I was, like, one of his last cases, right? And so his deal was, if your entire restitution isn't paid, which was actually not even for the occupied one, that was for a past burglary, you know, it was like $30,000, and he's like, if you don't pay that, you're gonna, youthful offender, 6 years in prison. And you know, my dad, the raging alcoholic, he's a functioning alcoholic, right? So what's he do? He cashes in his 401k for his only son and pays his restitution, and I get sent to that place I was talking about with the drug addicts, or with Jimmy, the drug addict. And so I go to this, it's called Goodwill down in St. Pete, and it's a 6-month, you know, live-in rehab. Everybody that's there is, you know, typically, like, court ordered to it or whatnot. All these other people that are there are, like, drug court people. They've gone through the drug court system. I was through the felony court system, so I felt like I kind of had this little thing that set me apart from the rest of the people there. But, man, I mean, rehab at that time, at 18 years old, it was pretty fun. You know, I got a girlfriend. You know, when you ride on the buses, you know, you get to get off, and then you go work and stuff after you've been there for a little while and stuff. And so, I mean, I fell in love with this former prostitute. And it didn't seem weird to me. I had done a lot of weird stuff up to this point, and it didn't seem weird to me. But she got out a month before I did, and I decided to stay in St. Pete because that's where she lived. And it turns out, for that month where she was living with another guy. And I was floored by this. I was really surprised. She was like 30 too, and I was like 18. I was in love, and thought it was real, and it was real to me, at least. And I don't know. I got out of the rehab. I stayed in St. Pete. I signed up to go to college because, again, like, I leave this place with really high hopes, and you know, I'm in AA now. This is DAA. At that time, I was in NA, right? And it's not like DAA, NA. It's like it's for me. It's a lot of the stuff is pretty much the same, right? I mean, it's not that different. And these guys that were in NA at the time down there, they had the best of intentions. These were, like, happily and usefully whole people that were, like, former drug addicts, just like I am. Just something clicked for them when they got there. But for me, my sponsor came over to my apartment, and we started working the steps, and it was a step a month, right? And so the first month, we're on the first step, and I got to read this book, and then we talk about it once a week and stuff, and first step stuff. And, like, I had known I had a problem with, like, you know, drugs for, I don't know, 4 years at this point, 4 or 5 years. Like, I just kept getting arrested and could not stop. And, I don't know, by month 2, I'm kind of starting to hold on a little tighter, you know? Like, things just weren't panning out. I was working 3 days a week on the beach, 4 days a week at school, and like, I don't know, and in rehab and stuff, they'd talk about like triggers and stuff, and I don't know, I would take the bus every day and pass a Walmart, and used to buy needles from Walmart, right? And so like, I don't know, I guess I had to avoid Walmart, but that was the way the bus went. So I couldn't avoid Walmart because I had to go to work to pay the bills to keep the apartment, and I made the best of friends in rehab, so I call Bobby, and I know Bobby's not doing very good, but Bobby needs a place to stay, so what better guy could I be than to have Bobby come stay with me? And I think I lasted like 60 days this time, and I get arrested again, and this time it's a violation of felony probation, youthful offender for 6 years, right? And so I get arrested in Pinellas County. I had stolen a Red Bull from a Walgreens. That was how I violated. I went in there and I put the Red Bull in my bag, like right in front, like Chris is the Walgreens employee, and like I put it in my bag, and then I notice you're looking at me, so I go to the bathroom and I leave it in the bathroom, and I try to leave, and they grab me, and I get away, but like my work hat's in there that says Jimmy on it. And I worked at a restaurant, so like the cops show up to the restaurant looking for Jimmy. You missing a Jimmy? And I mean, I was resisting a merchant and shoplifting, a misdemeanor shoplifting. This was what was going to send me to prison, right? And I fully believe that. Like after I got arrested and like kind of start to come to in jail, it kind of sets in as a reality that like this Judge Webb like would not let go of me last time. Like he had to be convinced that like he had to let me go, and I was like, I'm gonna have to go to prison now. And so like I get brought back to Pasco County, and they're like, oh, we see you were in protective custody. And by this time I realized what protective custody was, and I had heard that if you went to prison from protective custody, that like when you get there, they get to see that, the people that read your files and stuff, then they'll tell everybody, and they'll think you're a child molester, right? In case anybody didn't know what protective custody was. And so I was like, no, I want to go to like general population this time. So I shaved my head. I had hair kind of like I did now. I shaved my head, and I was ready to go. It was time to go to prison. I in my head, like I had like, I don't know, I had like 98 points or something like that. I mean, I was going to prison. There was no doubt about it. And so I get arraigned to go see Judge Webb, and I like a week before I go to see him, he gets removed from felony court, right? And because of all this stuff coming out about him giving extra time to people and all this stuff, and so I see a new judge for the first time, and I pled guilty, right? Like I didn't have any argument or anything like that. Now what I did tell the judge is I said that I knew where I went wrong last time, and if I just would have done this instead, if I had just kept going to meetings and stuff, is what I told him, because I figured this was like my last Hail Mary, to see if I could get out of this. And so he sent me away and brought me back for sentencing, and he said, against my better judgment, those exact words he used, and he sent me to a halfway house. And I don't really know. I show up at this halfway house, and like all of this happened in like 3 days, right? Like my mom, the GED teacher, used to also do GED for this halfway house. So this predicament I'm in and all this stuff, and she actually got up to testify in front of the judge, or like bear witness or whatever they call it, and about what the court system needed to do for me. And meanwhile, I'm sitting there and I'm like, Mom, you're going to get me sent to prison. Shh. But something, I don't know, something. And so, we go from me think I'm going to prison to like 3 days later, I roll up to this halfway house, right? And it was Ace Opportunities. It was when it was up in Port Richey. And I don't know, I got there and like guys were like, oh, just wait, you're going to hate it here. And in my head, I was like, man, I should be on my way to Orlando right now. I don't imagine how I could hate it here. Like, and I don't know, the first few days, everybody's telling me this, and I don't know what it is. Like, I don't see that it's God working in my life at that time, and still took years after that to realize it. But while I'm in there, this group of guys, some of which are sitting here tonight, bring a big book meeting in. And, before the meeting, the other guys in the group are like, oh, this is actually a pretty good meeting. And, we sit down, and, like, for the first time, I hear people from AA talking about using drugs. That was the first thing. Because, like, I had been to AA meetings before, like, getting in trouble and stuff, you get sent places. And like my experience was going to like the James Gang in Newport Richey. I don't know, this was like almost 20 years ago. And yes, this was like 17 years ago that I was in the James Gang, and it's a bunch of old guys, and like I told them that I just got sent there for smoking pot, you know, and they didn't really understand that. I don't blame them for not understanding that. But like that was my impression of what AA was. And so these guys were coming in here and they were talking about using drug stuff, and they talked about how the drugs, the alcohol, this other stuff wasn't their main problem. And for a minute, like, I didn't really understand that, because I was like, that was what got me arrested, that was what sent me to jail. That's, you know, at that point I had spent like 3 years incarcerated in some way or another. And you know, I was like, this is my problem. You know, I don't really understand it. But then they started talking about how it was, no matter how separated they became from drugs and alcohol and all that stuff, they would always go back to it. And that I could understand. And we read through like the doctor's opinion, and they just talked about this stuff that like all of a sudden started to click for me. And you know, I would like to tell you like I was wholly bought into this stuff at that time, but like I was maybe like half in, half out at that point. And everybody went to the gym at this halfway house, right? And turns out about half the people were also doing steroids at the time. And you know, I think at this point I was 18 at Goodwill. I think I was 19 here. Like long periods of my life not incarcerated didn't really happen. And so I'm like, well, I got to get in on this, you know. And then now that I'm back in society, and so like I don't know, for a month I started taking steroids and go to the gym with these guys. And then it comes out in the halfway house that this is happening. So they sit us all down in a meeting, and they're like, all right, we're going to send drug tests off to the lab. Would anybody like to admit anything? And, you know, I'm not. I've learned this lesson a few different felony charges ago. That you don't tell them anything. You let them figure it out. And so I sat there, and then nobody, of course, wanted to fess up to anything. But they start calling names for who they're going to send the drug test off to the lab for. And it's everybody that goes to the gym in the morning, except they didn't call my name. And all of those guys came back dirty for steroids, and all of them got kicked out of the halfway house. And here I was on like my very last chance, you know, to not go to prison for 6 years, because that was the most they could send me for at that age, you know, as long as I didn't like kill somebody or something. So I don't know. Again, it's like I don't see it as God, right? I just see it as like, look how lucky I am, right? And or it's, you know, it's because my mom works here or something like that. And I don't know. So I get out of this halfway house, and by this point, like, I had gotten a sponsor. It was one of the guys that was bringing this meeting into this halfway house, and I decided I needed to pick the guy with the most time, because it just made sense to me, right? Like, I need the guy with the most time because, you know, he's probably the most sober. And I started working the steps with him, and I get out of this halfway house, and I join Fourth Dimension, actually. This is like, it's like 10 or 11 years ago, you know, not my sobriety date now. And things got really good for like a really little amount of time. Like for like 3 months, maybe 6 months, I was a part of the group. I was doing the home group. I was doing the business meetings. They made me alternate GSR, and the GSR at the time never went to anything. So like I started going to like quarterly meetings. Like I was really I was going back to that halfway house and bringing that same Monday night meeting into those guys. Like I was starting to light up for this stuff, right? And man, I met this girl, right? And I don't know. All of a sudden, like, I can be so quick on my priorities shifting and like what's important in my life. And like today, I have a little bit more like responsibility to those priorities shifting. But like at the time, I was kind of all or nothing for something, you know. And at first, it was all or nothing for AA. And then all of a sudden, I met this girl, and like from like, I don't know, being born to like 18, drugs were like so important to me that like I didn't really care about a girlfriend that much. I didn't really care about like in my head I was like, you just cost me more money and stuff. Like I don't know, doing like a lot of opiates, like things weren't really working anyways. So I was like, you know what? So I didn't really have that much interaction. So like this girl's paying attention to me, and all of a sudden like I stopped going to that men's group meeting because she couldn't go, right? And then dinner afterwards, after like when the fellowship goes out to somewhere. Well, she wanted to go somewhere else, so I'd go somewhere else. And then work was like, hey, do you want to start working nights and we'll give you a raise? And I'm like, absolutely, I want more money. And so, like, I didn't realize it at the time, but, like, I slowly start to, like, work myself out of the program, right? And stop calling my sponsor. I think we got to, like, I think we did the steps, maybe. But I don't know, like, the amends, like, I said sorry to Mom. I was like, that's probably good, right? And, like, that's the one that really matters. And I started to work myself backwards out of AA. And then I got an abscess, right? And, like, you think, like, oh, you weren't shooting up yet, right? I wasn't. I got an abscess in my mouth. And if you've never had one, consider yourself fortunate. If you have, it's the most excruciating pain I've ever had in my life. It's just a really bad infection from a tooth in the mouth. And my very first thought when that pain started was like, I know exactly what will fix this, right? And so I go out and get some painkillers, and I start another run. And what that run quickly looks like for me is like, oh, I'm calling the older lady from the group and saying, oh, I need the $100 to go to the quarterly next week. Because at this point I've burned all my money out, and like, now I'm stealing from people, and I'm, taking money from the group, and all these guys are calling me, right? Caleb wasn't here, but the guys just like Caleb was calling me, and Jeremy and Tommy and Chris, and all these guys are calling me, trying to like bring me back in. But in my head, I don't know if it's like ego or what it was, shame, but I didn't want to talk to any of you people. And so I went on a run. I burned it all down to the ground again. And my solution is to go up to Tennessee because I've got family there. I can go kind of hide out there. And so I hid out in Tennessee for like a month. And it really wasn't that bad. I would like to tell you that it was horrible. And like my mind was chewing on me. But like I was staying with like this 78-year-old great uncle of mine, and he took me to the bookstore, and I like to read, and so I bought like 50 books, and I would just sat there and smoked cigarettes and drank soda and read all day. It was kind of dreamy, but 19 years old or however old I was, like life comes crashing back, and see, this is where my memory starts to get really fuzzed up, because that was actually when I was like 16 years old. I did run back to Tennessee at that, at the 20-year-old mark, but I'm going to backtrack to that 17-year-old part, though, or 16. When I went to Tennessee that time, I had grown up going to this church camp, right? And I don't know, I used to tell, I grew up in a good church, just a Methodist church. It was very, easygoing. It wasn't, like, fire and brimstone or anything. It was, like, I hear people talk about this stuff, and I'm like, man, I don't know, they were all fairly nice to me. And, but I grew up in, I had to go to this church summer camp. And, the first time I had to go, I really hated it. But then I got there, and, we did all this fun stuff, and I really liked it. So at, 16, I'm up in Tennessee in the summer, and I tell my mom, I'm like, I know what's going to fix me. I need to go back to that church camp. So I go to that church camp, and all the counselors there are, college, seminary college people. So I grabbed this counselor one night, and we sit out on this those green transformers outside of the cabin for 2 hours, and I'm telling him about how when I'm at that place, I feel like there's a hole inside of me that's filled. But as soon as I leave that place, all of a sudden I feel like I've got that hole back in my heart. And that was when I was using a lot of drugs to fill that. And I didn't realize how close to the truth I was at 16 years old about what my real problem was. But I don't know, it was a foreshadowing at the time that I didn't realize was going to kind of come back. And so I run up to Tennessee again when I'm 20 years old, and my now wife, we had been talking at the time, and she was actually going to move up to Tennessee with me. And then she was, I was the drug addict fry cook, at Chili's. And she was a server, she was older than me, she had a house and a car, and she was a pretty successful person. And it doesn't really make a lot of sense for her to move up to Tennessee and leave her family and leave all this stuff behind to come up here and live with me. Where I don't know anybody except my uncle, who's let me rent a cottage from him. And so I decided to move back. And again, this is where I'd like to tell you that I was white knuckling it and life was horrendous and all this stuff, but it's not the truth. The truth is that for the next year and a half, life was really good to me. I got engaged, we had a baby, I started working as a server at Chili's and making more money, and this whole time I'm dry, right? I don't really have a solution in my life, but I am using a lot of external stuff to keep me happy. And I don't know. I had already kind of been to AA, so like I knew like what all you people believed, but like in my head I was like, I'm just a little different than everybody else, and I don't know. Life was really, really good. My son was born in August of that year, and August, September, October, like October, November-ish is when I heard one of the fry cooks was selling coke, and I don't know. I heard that. And then I was at my grandparents' house and like helping clean up something or something like that. Like I was a member of the family again at this point. But like I had opened the drawers underneath my grandpa's sink in the bathroom, and he was diabetic, right? And what's a diabetic have for me? They got a bag of syringes under there. And so you put that and you put the cook selling coke together, and like here I am at like a 1.5 year dry with like everything going for me. I've got a newborn son. I'm engaged. I'm making money. I've got a house. I've got a car. I've got all this stuff going for me once again. And I kind of just flushed it all down the toilet. And the next 6 weeks were really dark, right? And what it would look like is like I would still go to work, and I would work my shift and stuff, and then I would buy stuff, and then I wouldn't come home for 2 days, right? And like here's my fiance with a newborn baby wondering what's happened to me, wondering what's going on. And then I come home really remorseful and tell her I'm really sorry. And deep down, like, there's a part of me that believes that, like, I'm being truthful to her when I'm saying, like, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm done. It's over. I'm going to get it together. And then 3 days later, I'll go on another binge. And it was just, I would come home sometimes at like late at night. I was a closer anyway, so I wouldn't get home till 1 o'clock in the morning, but instead I'd come home at like 4 o'clock in the morning, and I would just have tears running down my eyes, and I'd stand at the crib and I'd look at my 3-month-old son, and I would just, every fiber of my being, I wanted to be a better dad than I was being, right? And I couldn't, and there was nothing, there was like no sufficient force to get me sober, right? Like I couldn't do it. And I don't know, I'd like to, again, what I would do on these binges is I would take my stuff and I put it under the spare tire, under the car, and then I would go home and tell my wife I was never going to do this again and all this stuff. But I had learned my lesson one other time a few years ago about throwing all my stuff away, about how hard it was to get it all back. And so I decided to hide it under the spare tire, right, just in case. And I don't know, it was like I would go all night, and so I was going all night one night, and I had taken a beach towel or a blanket from the beach out and used it to like cover the windshield of the car, while I'm doing. And it turned out I had a bunch of sand in it, and the sand got all mixed with what I was doing. And I mean, I when I tell you, like, and this is just like one story of like a bunch of stories about like how I'm lucky to be alive today. But like I didn't care, and I mean I was air, sand. I was pushing it all in there, one way or another, and it was a really bad place. And I don't know. I one morning, my wife called me, and I was at Green Key Park like any respectable drug addict does, and I had the car that I considered mine, but was actually hers because she's the one with the credit and the house and all this other stuff. So she's like, I'm reporting the car stolen. I've canceled. I went to the bank again, like a very respectable drug addict, and I drew out half the money that was in there because I figured that was my half, and I'm not hurting you if I only take my half, right? And she's canceled the bank card. She's gonna report the car stolen. She's gonna do all this stuff, and she's like, "Do you even want to stop?" And and for the first time, I was probably honest with her, and I said, "I don't know," and because. At that point, like, I couldn't explain to you why I went back out again. Life was really good when I went back out. And, like, at that time, I was being honest when I said, I don't know, because in my head, like, I was just so used to wanting to numb everything around me. I didn't want to feel anymore. And it was like that for a really long time for me. And, like, I would go to any length to not have to feel anymore. And, like, it went from alcohol and weed in the beginning, to opiates, to coke and crack, to it didn't matter what it was. Like, my drug of choice switched quite a few times. And like what I came to realize later on is it didn't really matter what it was as long as it got me outside of myself, right? And so I I don't know, I drove to Starkey Park for some reason, and I parked the car and I sat on a bench and I watched the sunrise. And again, like, I don't think anything was really different at this point. That was actually December 22nd of 2017. And I actually made that my original sobriety date, and my wife was like, you were getting high all night that night, so that can't be your sobriety date, even though I went to sleep and stuff. But, you know, so it's the 23rd, in case I'm just wondering. And I don't know, I sat there and I watched the sunrise, and something felt different. And, like, leading up to this, like, I would get off of work and, like, I'm driving really erratic and stuff. And, you know, I remember thinking, like, I should just rear-end somebody and just have some paraphernalia on me. And that way, like, I would get arrested, but they'd send me to, like, a halfway house again, and then I could see these guys again, and then I could do the steps again, and, like, I could get my life back together. And sitting on that park bench, and then I would chicken out of that, of course. Like, I didn't want to do that. And then sitting on that park bench, I was like, there's nothing stopping me from calling these guys, right? Like, I think they'll remember me. You know, we were friends for, like, a couple years. And I don't know. I decided not to call anybody, but but it was a Friday. It was a Friday, and so I was like, I'm gonna go to the meeting tonight and you know, rekindle all of that. And so she drives me because I wasn't to be trusted with the keys at that point. And we pull up, and everybody's dressed like I am tonight. And it was the Christmas party. If nobody's ever been to it, it's the Fourth Dimension Christmas party. Everybody dresses up, and everybody looks really nice. And I'm in, like, gym shorts and a T-shirt. And I probably got a couple holes in it, you know, and my Civic had blood stains on the roof of it. Like, things weren't going very good. And I said, I can't do it. And so I didn't go. But, it didn't turn out bad. What I did do that night is I called Eric. And, you know, before I went back out, Eric was, like, my best friend in AA. And I was like, I need help. And Eric was like, great, meet me at Starbucks tomorrow at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, whatever time it was. So I meet him at Starbucks, and we sit down, and he's like, you did the steps. And I was like, I did do the steps. And he was like, all right, it's really kind of seems like you're dying right now. And I was like, yeah, I kind of agree with that. And he's like, you know, when somebody's dying, we're not going to, like, treat them very slowly and stuff. Like, we're going to do some, like, immediate work right now, try to get you feeling a little bit better, and then, like, if you want to go back through this stuff a little later on, maybe a little more thoroughly, you can. And I was like, all right, makes good sense to me. So, like, in the first step, like, again, like, my whole life written up to this point was, like, made good sense. So, like, I had a problem with drugs and alcohol, but what, you know, we drove home, sitting there in that car, is that, like, it's not just drugs and alcohol that are my problem. Like, I have a sobriety problem, right? Like, my head and my heart, like, I just have this crazy thing where, like, it chews on me until I do something about it. So, at the end of the day, like, step one for me is sitting in that car was, like, I'm screwed. Like, my track record, my history, my everything has shown me that I'm screwed, right? And then, so in step two, you know, he was like, are you willing to believe that I believe? You willing to believe that, like, I'm tapping into this power? And at that point, like, he'd been sober for, like, 4 or 5 years, and, like, he was starting to, like, gain a life for himself, and, like, he had gone through the same halfway house I did, except when he got out, like, he didn't stop doing AA. He kept doing it. And I was like, yeah, I'm willing to do anything at this point. And and then in step 3, we just I made a commitment to do the rest of the steps. And we got out of the car, and we went and did Christmas caroling. Right, and so if you're looking for the right recipe to get sober, it's step 1, 2, and 3 in like 20 minutes, and then go do Christmas caroling at halfway houses. And yeah, I don't know. We didn't do Christmas caroling, and then I went home and I wrote a 4-step. That was a Saturday night, and then Sunday night I was doing a 5th step with him, and I did that 5th step with him, and then I went home that night and I did 6 and 7. Right, and I don't know that, like, I don't know how thorough my 5th step was and all this stuff, but, like, I really don't know how much, I hate to say this, but I really don't know how much it mattered at that point, because, like, I was like 48 to 72 hours off of getting loaded, right? Like, I was not very clear-headed at the point, but what that 4th and 5th step did show me is it showed me, like, these patterns in my life that were, like, very clearly definable, like, when you put them down on paper and talk to them about somebody else, but, like, if you had asked me, I'd have been like, well, it's because my dad used to make me blow in his breathalyzer in the car when I was a kid, you know, and then he would scream at me when they would make him come check in, and, like, or it was, just all this external stuff. I got physically addicted to, pills when I was like 14 years old. I was like, that's why my life is the way that it is now. But the truth is that like I just was not willing to admit my part in all these things that had happened in my life. So we go on, and again, like 8 and 9, like this is where like I wish that like things might have been a little differently, because like making amends to like my fiance at like a week sober. Like, I had told her that I was getting sober, like, every single weekend for, like, the last 6 weeks. So, I don't know that it really carried a lot of depth and weight at that time. But it began to carry more depth and weight the longer that I stayed sober. So, I don't know. The next 7.5 years, right? Like, I don't know, life... I was, like, thinking about it on the way here, and, like... you hear people talk about like ups and downs of sobriety and stuff like that, right? And like, so like, I think of ups and downs, and I think of a roller coaster, and I'm like, when I used to relapse, like the roller coaster would kind of come off the tracks, right? Like it would just blow apart, and like I was really lucky I didn't die at a lot of points. But going through the steps and stuff, like the highs and lows of my life now are like much less significant than they used to be. I ended up switching sponsors, 4 or 5 years ago. And I went through the work with this new sponsor that was, like, outside of my sponsorship family. And, like, I did it because I felt like I was stagnant in what I was doing. And, like, there were a lot of solutions to what could have worked for me at that point. I could have got out and started helping more new guys. There were a lot of other things that I could have done instead of what I did. But what I did is I went through the steps in a different way than I had never been through before. And I really began taking a little bit more of a spiritual outlook to life, because I was pretty focused at that point of like AA and then family and then work. And that was like, it was more of like a totem pole at that point instead of more of less being kind of like a triangle. And so what I started to do is I started to try to take like these principles that AA had taught me, and I started to try to carry them more into my home life. And then I started trying to carry more into my work life. And then, I argued, I hate to argue, but had a long conversation with a sponsee about, because like I call it like seeking balance, right, between these different aspects of my life. And, the truth is that I never really get to that balance. It's one of those like games that you play that like the board is always kind of moving. And, what happens is I get a little too focused on work, and then I realize it, and then I got to put a little bit more time in the family and AA, and then I get too involved in AA, and I'm like, all right, I'm neglecting my family and work. And so like it's this constant seeking a balance for me, that up to this point has worked really well. And, this last week I got to fly out to Colorado and go to an AA convention. And like, I don't know, 7.5 or 8 years ago, like if you had said you're gonna fly out to Colorado to go to an AA convention, I'd be like, that sounds really boring. Like I don't really think that sounds like fun. I don't know if you're trying to get me to think this is fun. But the truth is, like it is like the thing that brings me the most joy in my life today is getting to do stuff like that. And it's not just because it's an AA convention. I get to bring my family with me when I go to places like that. I've got 2 sons now. And I used to hate when people would be like, my kids have never seen me loaded. And I was like, well, I used to stand over the crib, bawl my eyes out. I don't think he remembers that. But, my kids get to grow up with me today. And, they don't really know exactly, they're 6 and 7, they don't exactly know what AA is, but, like, they know I go to meetings every week, and, like, and they ask me, why do I go to meetings, and I'm like, to learn how to be a better dad, and that's usually what I tell them, and, like, they just go, okay, and then they go about their business, and, like, but there's truth to that to me, because, I started getting high when I was, like, 13 years old, and so, like, from 13 to 20, I hardly developed. I didn't really know how to, like, live, how to be responsible, how to do all these things, and, like, all of that stuff that I've learned has been inside of AA. When I look back on that, like, 1.5 dry, I think that one of the things that, like, I was really missing in my life was people, right? Like, I didn't have any friends. I had my wife who had some friends who, like, I would, interact with and stuff like that, but these group of guys that I have around me today that are, like, a core fact of my life, they bring me so much joy. And like I listened to these other talks of these guys today, and it was like I was sitting in the chair next to them, and I was getting to hear them tell their story. And it was, again, like be driving in traffic smiling, laughing at some stupid joke. And I wouldn't have it any other way. I cannot imagine trying to go through life and navigating all the stuff that it takes to navigate without having like these steps and these principles in my life today. And I think that's all I got. Thank you.